All right, so for the longest time, since this conversation started around expanding the college football playoff, I have very staunchly, and quite honestly still am, in the camp that 4 teams, probably the way that I would prefer my college football playoff to be. Now, with that being said, last night, when we got the 12-team college football playoff rankings, and you saw the bracket, and you saw, oh, shoot, we could have a playoff game with Notre Dame going to Happy Valley to play Penn State. Oh, Tennessee? There could be a college football playoff game in Neyland Stadium. That's going to be awesome. That in itself, if we get games at those kinds of venues, and I have to believe that we will based on how these rankings looked last night, we'll talk about it. That's going to be electric. So the 12-team playoff, it's here. We're going to enjoy it. We're going to savor it. It is Wednesday, November 6th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. College football, nothing but college football on this show. Last night, I know there was a lot going on, a lot of big news, obviously, with the college football playoff rankings and nothing else. I want to give you my thoughts on the rankings. We have a video out right now on the On3 YouTube channel with a full reaction. It's a good 15 minutes long. We shot it as soon as the rankings were released, so go check that out. I'll give you kind of the SparkNotes version, though, of my assessment of that here in a matter of moments. Also, hotel playoff today, Junior, going into Week 11 of the college football season. We'll break that down together. I went to my Twitter page, at JD Pickell, and asked y'all, what are the college football playoff hypotheticals that you want to unpack? And y'all came with it now. Y'all had some spicy ones. Now, we had Miami potentially being left out of the college football playoff. If they don't win the ACC, would that happen? If they go undefeated during the regular season? I don't know. Remains to be seen. Same deal with BYU. Y'all, they were ranked number 9 last night. Could they potentially have that same scenario as Miami where they run the table, they go undefeated during the regular season, get to Jerry World, and lose to, a Kansas State, an Iowa State, a Colorado? I don't know. Remains to be seen. We'll talk about that together, give you our thoughts there. Potentially some madness in the SEC that one of you talked about. We could have just a myriad of 2-loss teams in that situation. LSU could win the SEC, and that would just be bonkers across the board. So we'll talk about that one as well. And then I also want to get some conversation in today around what's going on out there on the plains in Auburn, Alabama. Because going into the year, hand up, we were high on Auburn. We loved Auburn. We loved the direction. We got out to Auburn during spring practice and saw the way that they were, running business, and we felt great about Auburn. However, hasn't been the year that we expected from Auburn, hasn't been the year that a lot of Auburn Tiger fans expected out there on the plains. So what's the pulse of the program out there? Series we've done here throughout this show's existence. It returns today, taking the pulse on what's going on out there with the Tigers. So I see the live chat blowing up. A lot of y'all talking about potentially when my little girl could be due. Keep the phone on Do Not Disturb, or typically during the live show. Today, though, we got this thing with the ringer on, so if it goes off during the show, we'll cut the show short, or in the future, we'll cut the show short, and we'll move on from there. But make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're dialed in. If you're listening via podcast, we appreciate you being subscribed to the podcast feed. A little rate and review helps us a lot, so thank you for that. Gosh, it hurts a little bit because I have a whiteboard behind the camera, and it has a breakdown of different games that we're picking throughout the week. I say we, everyone here on the video team at On3. And the number next to the week changes every week, obviously, it corresponding with the college football season. But to see Week 11 on that board, golly, not a fan of it. Not a fan of it already being Week 11, but regardless, we're going to make sure we make every college football Saturday count. And let's start with these rankings. Let's start with just the overall assessment of what we can learn from what these rankings were last night. I said this in our reaction video. I'll say it again. The first rankings of the college football playoff should be treated like getting your first exam grade back in a class. It does not mean that if you got an A on that first exam, cool, you're set for the rest of the semester. No, you got to put in the work. You got to do the proper things to get to where you want to go and have that A at the end of the semester. If you got a C your first exam, doesn't mean you're done. Does mean that you cut yourself out a pretty good path forward here. You got some work to do, but it doesn't mean that anything is, worth throwing in the towel for, all right? So, the biggest takeaway, I think, from last night for me in terms of what the committee was doing when they put these rankings together. Y'all, they love the eye test. Absolutely love the eye test. The reason why we can say that with a good amount of confidence, Miami, Indiana, BYU, all undefeated. However, BYU with the best resume, quote unquote, is ranked third among those three undefeateds. Oregon obviously being the other undefeated, and Army's undefeated, their top 25 team. But in that top 12 now, those three teams, I thought it was very fascinating how they put them together. BYU has 2 top 25 wins, but they're behind Indiana, they're behind Miami. Why is that? Well, I think the committee is saying now, hey, BYU, we appreciate what you've done. I mean, if you go ahead and win your conference, then you're rolling and vibes are good and you got a first-round bye in the college football playoff. However, we don't think all that much of the Big 12 is what I'm hearing from where they ranked them. We don't think all that much of the way that you've won. Again, great that you beat those teams. Great that you got 2 top 25 wins. However, Indiana, we value more that they are beating, not nobodies, but beating other teams within their conference by over 14 points every single time. So that's what I got from that. Interesting that Miami was ranked 4th. To me, that just says the committee loves Cam Ward. And maybe that's putting it too simplistically, but I really think that the committee is saying, okay, when Miami is on, when they find that special gear that we've talked about on this show, they're a wagon. And I foresee them continuing to be a wagon the rest of the season. Now, I also would say this. I think that the committee, with how they put these rankings together, another thing they told us, they're not assessing this thing in the vacuum of one season. Because last year, Michigan had a very similar path to what Indiana is doing right now. Like Michigan was playing essentially the lower level teams within the Big Ten to that first college football playoff rankings. They're in that top 2. They might have actually even been number 1 in those first college football playoff rankings. But again, you're saying, okay, well, Michigan did what Indiana's doing last year, and Indiana this year isn't even in the top 5. Why is that? Again, going back to what I just said, they're not assessing this in a vacuum. The committee going into the year knew Michigan was a really freaking good football team. They were top 10, top 5 in returning production. Indiana, while they're still a really good football team, there's a lot of, I think, variability and unknowns with them in regards to what they have on that roster. Curtis Rourke is great. He's also coming from the MAC. We don't know what he looks like when you play some of those better teams in the Big Ten. We're going to find out when they play Ohio State. The roster in itself, awesome. It took 30 transfers, 13 from JMU. Again, JMU jumping from the G5 to the Big Ten. They've made it happen. They're undefeated, and again, they're beating teams and they're beating the brakes off those teams. But I think it's worth noting now, the committee, I think, is giving a little bit of time to see what Indiana is when they play better competition. So Michigan got the bump last year because the committee felt good about who they were. They had a bunch of pieces back from the year before. They just won the Big Ten title. So I think that's worth noting, and I think we'll see that continue to be a factor here, especially in these first couple of rankings. I would also say this when it comes to just some thoughts on last night's rankings. I think it's maybe just a cultural thing for us as Americans. We love to feed into the idea of chip on our shoulder, disrespect, everybody's counting us out. And, I'm here for that. I'm all about that kind of a vibe. But I do think some of that disrespect talk when it comes to those first rankings are a little bit funny. One, what we said before, it's the first rankings. If you want to get bent out of shape because you're at number 9, if you're BYU in the first rankings and you feel like your resume is better than those other teams, be my guest. I mean, I'm all for it. Texas A&M, you think you should be higher? I probably agree with you. But, it's the first rankings. So let's not overreact and act like this is some end-of-the-world situation. A lot of football left to be played. That's the first part. The second part of that is the whole disrespect conversation actually doesn't matter at all because if you win your conference, if you're BYU, you get a bye in the first round of the college football playoff. So if I'm BYU, I say, I don't care what you rank me. Rank me 33rd in America. It doesn't actually matter. Well, don't do that because that would kind of hurt our chances to get a bye in the first round of the college football playoff. But you hear what I'm saying. Rank us wherever you want. If we win the conference, we're in the college football playoff. That's how this whole thing is going to work. Now, I do understand you probably want that bye. We'll talk more about that actually a little bit later in the show. But I just think the whole idea of we're disrespected, they don't think we're this, they don't think we're that, it's just win football games, win your conference, make the dance, and the committee won't matter at all. How about that? Last thing I'll say, the college football playoff home games are going to be electric. I said it at the opening of this live show, but I want to say it one more time to the windows of your soul if you're watching live on YouTube. The 12-team college football playoff field with home playoff games will be absolutely cinematic. It'll be poetic. And I'll say this too. It will be, I think, the best way to add in new fans to college football. The reason why? How many times now do you have a casual viewer of college football catch a game? What do they catch? They catch the college football playoff, which is played at a neutral site. Love the Rose Bowl, love the Sugar Bowl, love the Cotton Bowl, all that. I'm here for it. Or they'll watch the national title game. Again, neutral site. What makes college football little bit different, the fabric of the sport, is because when you got to roll in and play a game in Knoxville, Tennessee, you got to go play a game in Happy Valley, got to go play a game in South Bend, and to see the fan base put on their absolute best showing and try to impact the game, I think the home field of what college football brings to the table is unlike anything else on the face of the planet, much less in the sports world. And so now for those games to have a turned up level of exposure for the casual viewer, you go watch a college football playoff game and say you're watching it through your broadcast and it's Death Valley at night in Baton Rouge. Okay, you're going to get me a little bit more dialed into the sport than I was before. So again, I'm not here to say that college football needs to add extra fans. That's not the point. But I do love, at the bare minimum, the exposure to just the sports world in general with college football playoff home games. It's going to be special. It's going to be very special. I think it's going to be a massive win here as we move on throughout the rest of the expanded playoffs existence. So get at me on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, at JD Pickell, and let me know what you thought of last night's rankings and some of your takeaways from what the committee told us. So on Wednesdays, we always do this now. If you're new to the show, welcome. This is Hotel Playoff. We got the penthouse, teams that we feel great about that more or less control their own destiny. We got the lobby, teams that also may control their own destiny, but we want to see them clear a few hurdles before we put them into the penthouse when it comes to this whole college football playoff discussion. You got the teams need a reservation. Doesn't mean that they're out of it, but it does mean they got some groundwork ahead of them. They got to make sure they get after it. And then you got the G5 party. The G5 party this week, very slim. Very slim. At first, that party had a lot of folks there. It was a packed house. However, now it is becoming increasingly more of a difficult party to get invited to, kind of exclusive. So let's start in the penthouse. Again, these are the teams that we feel really freaking good about right now when it comes to their aspirations to make the college football playoff. We'll start with the number one team in America, number one team in last night's rankings, number one team in pretty much every poll that you check, and that is the Oregon Ducks. Here's the thing that I think is important to note about them. Where's their weakness? Like, what's the one area for Oregon where you say, if they get in a game where they have to play great pass defense or they get in a game where they have to play great in the trenches, like, you're not saying that. You're looking up and down this roster and you're saying, okay, at pretty much every position, I feel relatively confident that Oregon can at least hang with whoever they end up playing. Now, are they going to be dominant? Remains to be seen. But you feel really good about the level of caliber of player that you have across this roster at any given position. I'll also say this. I love, with every fiber of my being, the experience factor for Oregon. A lot of dudes with a lot of football under their belt. That matters. We've seen across the previous college football playoffs, even in the 4-team model, experienced teams have the steady hand, and they win big in the high-stakes scenarios, whether it be conference title games or college football playoff games. That's going to matter for Oregon. There is not one spot on this roster that you can point to and say, yeah, well, that true freshman's got a ball for them to have a chance. No, you're not saying that. You're not saying that because it's not there. Oregon, obviously, in the penthouse. Ohio State, number 2 last night in the rankings. With the way the bracket shakes out, they would, by that logic, be the number 5 seed in the college football playoff. Listen, their only blemish on the schedule here is you got a 1-point loss at the number 1 ranked team in America as of right now. If we want to argue about it, we can. I appreciate the most for Ohio State. In the game against Penn State, things were far from perfect when it comes to circumstances. Your offensive line, I mean, you're playing musical chairs up there and drawing straws for who's going to start where. You got guys making their first starts at pretty critical positions on the offensive line for the first time in their life. Oh, by the way, you're on the road against a top 5 opponent, a team that wants with every piece of their soul to beat you because they haven't in a long time. You also have a quarterback now, to add fuel to the fire here, that did not play his best game. Will Howard actually, after the game, said, I think that was the worst football game I've played this year. Had the fumble out of the back of the end zone, had the pick 6 to get the party started for Penn State. And even with all those things being said, Ohio State won by a touchdown. I think they could have won by a whole lot more. Like, I'm looking at that game and saying it probably would have, should have, could have been 27-6 if Will Howard doesn't fumble out the back of the end zone and if Will Howard doesn't throw a pick to spot Penn State their only touchdown of the day. The defense was just chilling out, playing man coverage until they felt like not playing man coverage. Ohio State still has better players than the majority of college football. If you thought Penn State was creeping up on them, I don't think you were wrong to have that take, but I also think we were proven in that game, like Ohio State still has more dudes than just about everyone else in the Big Ten, right up there with Oregon. Georgia at number 3 in last night's rankings. We still have them in the penthouse. I trust the roster. I've said that many times. I think you look at this team on paper and, like, there's not a lot left to be desired. Okay, great. The trenches starting to get healthy again. You feel good about that running back room when they're healthy. And true freshman Nate Frazier's been an absolute dog for them, no pun intended. You feel good about a lot of spots on this roster. The thing that gives you some pause about Georgia is the way that they have played as of late. More specifically, the way they have executed or not executed as of late. The thing that I love about Georgia, though, and the thing that I think is important to note with them in relation to this college football playoff conversation, Georgia may have the greatest potential energy out of anyone in the country. What I mean by that is potential energy is essentially what an object could eventually become or could eventually do. The best example of this is like when you have a big old boulder sitting at the edge of a cliff. If that boulder gets just pushed a little bit over the edge, it's going to be an unstoppable force. I feel the same way about Georgia. If Carson Beck just gets the proper push, if you will, and stops turning the football over, Georgia is going to be that boulder headed downhill. If they bring that physical edge every single week, they have the potential energy, I think, to beat anyone in America. We saw that when they went to Texas and beat the then number one ranked team in America by 2 scores. So Georgia, for us, very much so, still in the penthouse. Great one this week now. Great one this week against Ole Miss. That game preview and prediction is actually already on the On3 YouTube channel. Miami, they are ranked number 4 in the college football playoff rankings as of last night. Would have been seeded 3, neither here nor there. They're in the penthouse for us, and we've been us and the committee actually aligned quite a bit last night on how we felt about Georgia or how we felt about Miami. Only have games at Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and at Syracuse left. Show me the loss there for Miami. Barring Miami having some sort of major letdown, I don't see it. Cam Ward is really, really good, and he is going to be good enough, I think, to JanSport Miami to at least the college football playoff, probably an ACC championship as well within that, and I feel really good about where Miami is trending. Now, trending is the important word there. Miami has had multiple spots now. Really, since Florida, you have not seen them play a complete football game against a Power 4 opponent. Does that bite them? Again, I think they're going to hopefully lock in a little bit more here as we get to November and then realize what's in front of them. But speaking to what we said about with Georgia, with Miami, the potential energy of Miami, I think, is also very, very high, but we've seen a little bit more variance from them. So with the schedule they have and with how they have played to this point in the year, I think you would be very, very wrong if you did not have them in your own playoff penthouse with them being undefeated. Texas, they were ranked 5 last night. Again, this is not our rankings. I'm just kind of adding some context to what happened last night in relation to our playoff penthouse. It is very wild to me a little bit how much the volume has been turned down on Texas. And we said it last week in this segment, but I want to say it again. What about Texas changed drastically since the Georgia loss? Like, what about them was true before that game that we somehow now believe is not true? Well, maybe Quinn Ewers isn't as good as we thought. Okay, I mean, I guess I could see where that take is coming from, but I would also point back to the game against Alabama. I'd point back to how he was playing early on in the season. Like, was he not his best against Georgia? Sure. Does that one data point disprove everything that we've thought to be true about Quinn Ewers going into this season? There was a point in time during this year where we're like, yeah, he's a Heisman Trophy contender. And I get he missed some games, but like I don't think that Texas is somehow a team we should just write off here because they had one bad showing at the crib against a really good Georgia team. And then the Vanderbilt game was a little bit closer than you would like. Still, top 25 Vandy. I think Vandy's a lot better than people would give credit for. So Texas, the narrative's up and down. I understand that, but I still think they're one of the best teams in college football. I'd be surprised if they weren't there at the end in the college football playoff. Indiana. Last night kind of felt like the committee saying, all right, Indiana, we see you. Because, again, they were ranked ahead of BYU, who, just to be real here, has a better resume on paper than what Indiana brings to the table. Indiana, so far, no top 25 wins. Okay, it is what it is, but they have beat everybody by over 2 scores. So the committee is saying, hey, we see what you're doing. Keep it up. Good to have you in this top 12 at this point. I think Indiana, honestly, if they just look solid against Ohio State, they're in the college football playoff. Just look solid. Just don't get blown out. I'd be surprised, quite frankly, if Indiana were to get blown out by Ohio State. But it is what it is. We get to see them against Ohio State here in the not-too-distant future. Now, a team that's already played Ohio State, it did lose, but I still think you got to give them some credit. It's Penn State. They're also in the playoff penthouse this week. Their only loss is to the number 2 team in college football by a touchdown. Now, I just told you, I think that margin of victory for Ohio State could have been a little bit more. The frustrating thing if you're Penn State is you feel like you probably went home with some bullets in the chamber. And, like, that can't be the way that you live when you play some of these top-tier teams in college football, much less in your conference. Like, you can't get down to the red zone on 2 separate occasions and come out with 0 points. Like, that's not winning football. I know it. You know it. Andy Koltanecki knows it. And I have to believe now, as much as that game hurts, Penn State still should really run the table the rest of the way and be 11-1. We'll talk about what happens in the Big Ten title game when it gets here as it pertains to who ends up making that game in Lucas Oil. But I think that big game experience for Andy Koltanecki, to be able to get a rep at that and say, okay, here's what I would do differently given the opportunity again, there will be more opportunities for Penn State. They will have another chance, maybe not at Ohio State, but at someone of a similar caliber when it comes time for the college football playoff. I cannot wait for it because I think they'll be better for it, and I think they will swing their sword in a more emphatic fashion when that time does come. So that's who we have in the penthouse as of right now. These are the teams we have in the lobby. Now, the lobby is not a bad place to be. If you're in the lobby, you're in the hotel. All right, you're within striking distance. A lot of these teams, I would say, still very much so control their own destiny, if not all these teams. However, need to clear some hurdles, right? Need to clear some hurdles. Tennessee, I was really close to putting them in the penthouse, quite frankly, because with where they were ranked last night, the committee was saying, hey, we love the eye test for Tennessee. We love the way you're trending. We value the wins that you have right now over Oklahoma when you got it, over Alabama, obviously, when you got it, and the way that's aged. I think with that ranking, if I'm a Tennessee fan, I'm curious how much margin for error I have because we still play Georgia. And, okay, that game will be what it is. I'm sure it'll be a tremendous battle. But, like, if you were to drop that game to Georgia, how far do you fall? Now, you don't want to find out. That's the first part. And I think if I'm a Tennessee fan or if I'm on that team at Tennessee, I'm saying, okay, they think this of us with how high they ranked us within the top 10. And we honestly haven't even really played our best football yet. Like, we sit in here every single Sunday and we're like, man, Tennessee won, but, y'all, they're so close. A play here, a play there, a block here, Nico connecting downfield there. Like, they are very close now to, I think, finding their stride. It's discouraging because you haven't hit your stride yet, but it's encouraging because you haven't hit your stride, you're ranked in the top 10, and your best ball ideally is still in front of you with some of your most important ball still in front of you. So, Tennessee, if you want to put them in the penthouse, I wouldn't fight back super hard. I want to see that Georgia game and get a good gauge for them before we make that move. Notre Dame. Now, you put them in the lobby right now because of the loss to NIU, but there's I think it's Kelly Clarkson who's got a song, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger. I won't sing it because it'll sound too much like the real thing, and YouTube will probably pick it up and copyright us. That's kind of vocals we're working with here. But what I will say is that's kind of the deal for Notre Dame right now. They were number 10 last night. And, yeah, the NIU loss, it sucked. I'm sure it was a dark few days out there in South Bend, Indiana. But Notre Dame's right there. Notre Dame, quite frankly, I believe, controls their own destiny. And Notre Dame now, if you look at the path ahead of them, they could very realistically finish, if you're freezing those wins when they got them, with 4 ranked wins. Texas A&M, that win, for the most part, continues to age well. The win over Louisville, I believe that was a top 15, top 20 win when you got it. The Navy win, that was a ranked win. Definitively a ranked win. And then you imagine Army will be ranked when you play them. And if you beat Army, again, that's your 4th ranked win on the season. So the NIU loss is a black eye. It's embarrassing. I totally get that. However, Notre Dame now, if you go 11-1 with 4 ranked wins, then keep your conference title game. We'll chill at home. We'll have some Funyuns. We'll watch y'all beat each other up, and then we'll draw who we draw in that first round of the college football playoff. Let's get after it. So the Irish, don't look now, in the lobby, and very much so in the mix. Now, I went back and forth on where to put Clemson because they have 2 losses now. They probably have to win the ACC to make the college football playoff. The Louisville game was an absolute gut punch, not just because it was a loss and because you lost at home. It was because of the way that you lost. It was because it wasn't even, quite frankly, all that competitive. And so with how much the committee values the eye test, I worry about Clemson having 2 blowout losses and somehow finding a way with an at-large bid. I don't think that's going to happen. I know it was Georgia. I know it was game 1. I get it, but y'all, it still counts. And the Louisville game was just kind of an extra punch to the gut there. So it's only 1 loss in conference play. Clemson very much so could still make and win the ACC, but I think that's their only path. So right now, having the lobby, Could probably put him in the need a reservation space, but we'll go ahead and have him in the lobby until further notice because of what they did in between those two games, right? We still saw a lot of good from Clemson, and the path is still very much so still there. BYU, saying, JD, you got BYU in the lobby? You not see us last night be ranked number 9 in the college football playoff rankings? I mean, if we went out, hey, we're probably, I assume, going to have a first-round bye in the college football playoff. You have us in the lobby? We said this last week. I don't trust you. I wish I could. I would love to trust you. I'm a trusting guy. I feel like I'm an optimistic guy. But y'all, BYU, you have done so much to make me not trust you. The Oklahoma State game is what I keep going back to. Oklahoma State's not all that good. Maybe I'm being harsh here, but it is what it is. That was a close game. 3-point game. And Oklahoma State now is it's not trending as the best win overall, if you will. I don't mean to harp on one win, but you hear what I'm saying. Now, you do have the 2 top 25 wins. That's great. The SMU win, awesome. Kansas State win, awesome. But you've been so up and down. And it's not just me that has an issue with it. It's the committee that has an issue with it. They're telling you, hey, BYU, we don't think that much of your conference. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Also, we don't think that much of what you've done to this point in the season. The eye test, it leaves something to be desired here. So for BYU, they're in the lobby. They control their own destiny, win the Big 12 undefeated, enjoy that first-round bye. However, if you lose a game, I don't think you feel all that great about your chances, not just to win the Big 12, but to have that bye the first round of the college football playoff. We'll see how that ages, but that's how I feel. SMU, in the ACC, man, number 13 last night. Have a loss? Yeah, it lost to BYU. That's why I would say if you were ranking the teams in the lobby, BYU would be ahead of SMU. No way around it. But undefeated in the ACC, absolutely dismantled Pitt. That was ridiculous. Everything is right there in front of them. The catch for me here, the reason why I don't have SMU in the penthouse is because they can't lose again. I mean, even in the ACC title game, I think if they were to lose to a Miami, I think they'd probably be out of the dance, unfortunately. But still, SMU, there's a will, there's a way, there's a path. Go win the ACC, leave no doubt, and vibes will be tremendous out there in Dallas. One more team to talk about here, Texas A&M. You're in the lobby. You control your own destiny. The loss to South Carolina sucks. It sucks even more that Le'Veon Moss and his injury is brutal. Like I said, still in control. The issue I have here is Le'Veon Moss and what he brings to the table. In a lot of ways, he was, to me at least, the identity of how Texas A&M played offensively. Like, they are 62% of the time run the football team, and now you will be without your best player on offense. So can you account for that? Can you shapeshift a little bit here? Can you get more from Amari Daniels? Can you get more from Marcel Reed? Can you get more from the pass game? Like, what does it look like for you to make up for that level of production that's lost? And also, quite frankly, just what he was overall as a game breaker for you. Like, who's your go-to guy now when it's 4th and 1, we got to pick up a first down? I think the play call changes a little bit from, hey, let's get the ball to 8 to, okay, what do we like here? What's our method of attack? So A&M still very much so in control. Like I mentioned, you got to go beat Auburn at Auburn. You got to go beat Texas in College Station. So we'll see what happens there. It's all right in front of them. But the loss of Le'Veon Moss is heartbreaking for all college football fans and a massive, massive blow to what Texas A&M does offensively. All right, so here are the teams that need a reservation. And typically we go team by team here, but I want to talk about 2 teams at the same time right now because they play this week. LSU and Bama. Now, I'm not concerned about where either team is ranked. I get Bama was ahead of LSU. It is what it is. Bama LSU means so much to so many people regardless of playoff implications. You just go on and add the fact now that it is a playoff game. Like, the loser of this does not make the college football playoff. The winner of that game, in my estimation, is not just in the lobby. Like, you don't just go up a level in hotel playoff. I think you go up to the penthouse. Because look at the path for both of these teams if they were to win the game. If LSU beats Bama, you got a game at Florida, and we're going to see what the health level of a DJ Lagway is going forward. But let's just go ahead and assume that for whatever reason he's not full go. You could play a third-string quarterback. Okay, that is already probably a game that LSU's favored in, but if DJ Lagway isn't full go or not able to go at all, again, we'll see what happens there. That'd be a very big advantage for LSU. Vanderbilt, you play them, be feisty, but you get them in Baton Rouge. Oklahoma, they are a world of question marks right now. That would be a game that you'd be favored in. So the path is very much so there if you're LSU, if you beat Bama to finish 10-2 and to be right there in the college football playoff, in my opinion. Same deal for Alabama. You play Mercer, okay? Then you go to Oklahoma, and you play Auburn. Now, the great part for Alabama fans, you get Auburn in Tuscaloosa. You don't got to go to Jordan-Hare and deal with all that voodoo. Like, you get them at the crib. Again, 10-2 Bama, based on what they said last night, according to the committee, they should be in the college football playoff. So, the path is very much so clear for both these operations if and when they beat the other. So, we'll see what happens there. Ole Miss, man, they can springboard, I think, into the penthouse with a win over Georgia. The path left for them, if they were to beat Georgia, would be at Florida, Mississippi State. Again, I don't want to speak too authoritatively on what's going on with the quarterback situation at Florida because I'm sure that will change as soon as we get off the air. The bottom line is you should be favored at Florida. You should beat Mississippi State. I know it's the Egg Bowl. I know it's weird. You should beat Mississippi State. So if you can beat Georgia, be 10-2, again, maybe you find yourself in the penthouse. Have a win over a number 3 ranked team and have other wins on your resume that probably are aging better than when you got them. Like the game at South Carolina, I think is one that's going to age well for them. I expect South Carolina, if they keep winning, to be ranked next week. So we'll see what happens there. But for Ole Miss, definitely a path, and it feels a lot more optimistic than it probably did a couple of weeks ago. Iowa State, need a reservation, lost Texas Tech. The Big 12 is just nuts. Like, they still have to play Kansas State. They are currently tied with another team right now that needs a reservation, and that is a team that was number 20 last night in the college football playoff rankings. That was Colorado. So these two were tied. I have no idea what the tiebreaker situation would look like if both went out. I think there's other things that will play into that. I want to say this about Colorado. Iowa State, great, handle business. The Big 12 is nuts. You lost to Texas Tech. You got to beat Kansas State. Okay, let's keep rolling here. Colorado, that was a landmark moment last night, if you ask me. Because we said this a couple weeks ago, I'll say it again. Colorado is not just a good story. They're not. It was fun at first when Deion Sanders got there. They win a few games. They tail off at the end of last year. Everyone, including myself, is asking questions about who they are, what they're going to be going forward. Can they take another step forward with another portal class? The answer is emphatically yes. The answer is they are tied for second in the Big 12 right now with one conference loss. They don't have to deal with that tiebreaker with Kansas State if they keep winning out, because Kansas State, unfortunately for the good folks out there in Manhattan, Kansas, lost this past weekend again to a Big 12 opponent in Houston. So, like, Colorado, it's all right there in front of them. They're not just, like, a fun thing to talk about. No, good for Deion Sanders and what he's doing out there. Like, they're legitimately a team you have to talk about now in the Big 12 title race, and by that logic, in the college football playoff race. Colorado now has games at Texas Tech. This week will be huge. You got Utah, got to go to Kansas, you got Oklahoma State. Will any of those be layups? I don't expect that. Are all those winnable? You better believe it. You better believe it. One more team that needs a reservation right now. I almost put them in the G5 party because the G5 party is looking a little bit slim. But actually, we can't put them in the G5 party because they're not a G5 team. That's Washington State. Washington State would actually be better served if they were in a G5 team, or a G5 conference, rather. They're playing a Mountain West schedule, but for Washington State, they only have one loss to Boise State, but they have to find a way to push themselves up to number 11 or higher in the college football playoff rankings because of the fact they're not in a conference recognized from the college football playoff that would allow them to have an auto bid. So that they're not in that G5 discussion. They have to, like Notre Dame, be ranked within the top 12, top 11 probably is more likely, and that's a way they could get in. All right, so Washington State, hope is still alive, but I don't think it's all that likely. But still, that's why you need a reservation. Get out the Expedia, get out the Marriott points, whatever you got to do to find your way into the college football playoff penthouse, or just hotel playoff in general. All right. G5 party. Waka Flocka's got a great song, Grove Street Party. I think he also hosts the G5 party, so we appreciate Waka Flocka doing that for us. Boise State, right now they got the belt. They got the belt. Based on last night, there's a path where they could even finish higher than number 12. Like, if they win out and maybe some madness happens across the Big 12, we'll talk about that later. Who's to say Boise State doesn't find themselves at number 11? And then maybe Boise State is the fourth highest conference champion. And maybe they have a bye the first round of the college football playoff. A lot of ifs, a lot of potentials, but still, that's where Boise State is right now. That's what they have earned at this point in the season. Now, one more team in the G5. Again, I told you it's a slim group this week. I wish it wasn't, but it is. Army's at number 25 this week in the college football playoff rankings. Army's undefeated. Now, I think Army, if they were to beat Notre Dame, could probably skyrocket up the rankings. But I am a little bit concerned that they're only at 25 and have that much ground to cover, and how much of a, I guess, head start or a lead, if you want to call it that Boise State has ahead of them. So if Army, again, if they, hopefully Navy is who you draw in the conference title game and they're ranked high, or someone else in the American Athletic, hopefully whoever you play in the American Athletic Conference title game is ranked as high as possible when you get to pocket that win. But I don't feel incredible about Army's chances as of right now. Not saying it can't happen. You beat Notre Dame, this whole conversation changes, but right now Boise State comfortably in the lead for the G5 party, and we'll see how this thing ages in a few weeks. I'm sure it'll be absolutely useless, this whole discussion we just had, because of how crazy college football is, but nonetheless, that's why they play the games. That's why they play the games. So let's recap it for you here. In the penthouse, teams we feel great about as of right now: the Oregon Ducks, Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, Texas, Indiana, and Penn State rounds out the penthouse and hotel playoff. In the lobby, still got a chance. Need to make some moves, though, to really solidify your spot in playoff penthouse. But we got Tennessee, Notre Dame. Clemson is hanging in there, probably at the end of the lobby, but they're still in there. BYU and SMU, as well as Texas A&M, all hanging out in the lobby. Who needs a reservation? Well, LSU, Bama is going to give us a good gauge for who has a chance to keep their hopes alive for a reservation for the college football playoff this weekend. They are both in the need a reservation sector this week. Ole Miss also hanging in there. They play Georgia. That'll tell us a lot. Iowa State and Colorado. Again, I don't even know what the Big 12 tiebreaker exactly reads like. I'm sure we'll learn in the next couple of weeks. Madness. Both are in the reservation space right now with their college football playoff hopes alive. Wazoo just hanging in there. Hanging in there. It would be a Cinderella story, truly, if they were to make the college football playoff, but only one loss. And if you want to talk about a good loss, it was by a fair margin, but it was still to Boise State, which is a top 12 loss at this point in time. Speaking of Boise State, them and Army are hanging out in the G5 party with Boise State. They're on the aux, if you will, at the G5 party. All right, they're controlling the vibes. It's their Waka Flocka's hosting it, allegedly, by how that graphic's set up. But Boise State's in control of that party and will continue to be in control until further notice. All right, so those graphics will be out on my social channels a little bit later today. So follow me there, Instagram, Twitter, at JD Pickell. I'm sure we all agree. I'm sure there is absolutely zero objections to everything we just said. So looking forward to us all agreeing in the comment section a little bit later. Quick sidebar. We're about to get into these college football playoff hypotheticals. I don't know if it's the worst job in the world, because there's probably some pretty bad jobs out there that I'm not even thinking about right now. But like being a college football playoff committee member, as someone who makes lists on a weekly basis, and the kickback I get in my comment section, the lists that I make don't actually have an impact on what happens on the field. The lists that the college football playoff committee puts together, talk about backlash. Talk about having some unhappy campers in your proverbial comment section. I don't know. It's a tough job. But with that being said, I asked y'all via my socials. I said, hey, hit me with your college football playoff hypotheticals. Y'all answered in elite fashion, as you always do. So let's unpack these one by one here. Landon has a good one for us. He says, what happens in this college football playoff hypothetical if Miami were to lose the ACC title game and BYU were to lose the Big 12 title game? The caveat here that's important to mention that makes this hypothetical so juicy are both in the playoffs with undefeated regular seasons. So Miami 12-0, BYU 12-0, they get to the title game, they lose. So that auto bid you have as one of the conference champions no longer there. Do you still make it as an at-large bid? We'll talk about it right now. First things first, make sure you're subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel, College Football Sickos. We appreciate y'all being dialed in. If you're watching live, just make sure you're subscribed. If you're watching as a one-off clip, we appreciate you for that. Make sure you're subscribed as well so you can watch the live show with us and have a good time, interact in the live chat and all that. All right, so let's start with Miami, because I think theirs is a little bit easier for me to unpack. It's important to look at where they're starting at in these first college football playoff rankings. Miami got the number 4 ranking last night. Why is that noteworthy? Well, look at the resume. No ranked wins right now for Miami. It's not a crime. They also have no potential for ranked wins the rest of their schedule. I say potential very loosely. As it stands right now, there is no ranked teams left for Miami to play. So why are they number 4? Well, the committee is saying, hey, we like the way Miami looks. We like what we're seeing on the field right now. So here's the question now. If it is about the eye test, and Miami keeps handling business, and they finish the year undefeated, how high do they climb in these college football playoff rankings going into the ACC title game? I don't think it's unrealistic to say we could see Miami as high as number 3. I think the lowest you could see them at is maybe number 5. But if the committee likes the eye test with Miami, I don't think there's a whole lot there that could drop them out of the college football playoff 12-team field. Unless for some reason they just got the doors blown off of them in the ACC championship game, maybe then you talk about the eye test in a different fashion. But again, if they are definitive the rest of the regular season and they continue to give the committee what they want, which is showing them, hey, we're a good football team, we win by a large margin, you would hope if you're Miami, you don't play with your food the rest of the way. Well, if that's the case, then if you're Miami, like, okay, then you've checked all the boxes, probably sitting somewhere in that top 5 going into conference title weekend. And as long as you don't give them a reason to no longer like the eye test, like Miami should be in the college football playoff. So in that way, I think Miami would have an at-large bid to the college football playoff, even without winning the ACC title. Now, BYU is a lot more intriguing. It's almost the inverse discussion of what we just said with Miami. BYU got 2 top 25 wins, but they're ranked number 9. Why? The committee is telling us what they think of BYU, and they're telling us what they think of the Big 12. Unfortunately for everyone in Big 12 country, it's not a glowing review of what that conference is right now. So here's my question. If you're not impressed with BYU winning 2 top 25 games, one in SMU and one against Kansas State, is it going to get better as the season goes along if you don't win the conference? Like for BYU, at Utah, Kansas, Arizona State, Houston, probably not going to be ranked matchups going forward. So my concern here is for BYU. They've kind of put their best foot forward already when it comes to their resume. If BYU is definitive and can maybe turn the tide a little bit on the whole eye test discussion against these teams, and maybe they're just winning by 3 touchdowns the rest of the way, okay, different discussion. But I think right now, if they were to lose the conference title game, and they're at 9 right now, I don't know how high they climb, but if they're at 9 right now and they lose the conference title game, I think BYU is actually on the outside looking in, which I know is the last thing you want to hear if you're watching this and you're a BYU fan, but I think that's the reality right now. Again, the committee is telling us what they think of BYU. They're telling us, hey, we appreciate what you've done. You're a top 12 team. However, the eye test is something we value and something that you're not bringing to the table at this point in time. Resume is great. And who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the resume means more as the year progresses, but I don't see that being the case here in regards to BYU and their college football playoff aspirations. But Landon, great hypothetical. Appreciate you bringing that one to the table. All right, here's a fun one. This is honestly a hypothetical that, as we put it together, made my head hurt a little bit. Tiger Yap. 26, mind you, not Tiger Yap 25 or 24. This is Tiger Yap 26 coming at you, live and living color. His college football hypothetical that he has for us is some SEC madness. In his hypothetical, Georgia loses to Ole Miss. Okay, got it. Tennessee then loses to Georgia. Okay, keeping track. And then in the SEC title game, you get Texas playing LSU, and LSU, according to Tiger Yap 26, wins the SEC over Texas. So LSU is your SEC champ. So in this scenario now, he says we would have 5 10-2 SEC teams. We actually would have 4 10-2 SEC teams, but we have another 2-loss SEC team in Texas in the college football playoff, or in that college football playoff discussion hypothetical. So let me just backtrack for you a little bit here. This is how it would look. You would have Georgia, based on this hypothetical, at 10-2. You would have Tennessee, based on this hypothetical, at 10-2. You would have LSU at 10-2, but winning the SEC with only 1 loss. Remember, that 1 loss is at Texas A&M. You would have Ole Miss, in this scenario, winning out at 10-2, and hypothetically, the team that would also be a 2-loss team with losing the title game in Atlanta, assuming they beat A&M and make it there, is Texas. So you got 4 10-2 and 1 11-2. For all y'all keeping track at home, we're going to go team by team here and tell you who gets into the college football playoff, because this is, I don't think it's the wildest scenario in terms of like likelihood, but here's how it would look. Obviously, LSU, you win the SEC. Congratulations, punch your ticket. Vibes are immaculate in Baton Rouge. Go Tigers. And you got a first-round bye. You're in the college football playoff. Now, Texas, let's just be real here. The Big Ten and SEC runner-up, they're not getting left out. I know it's an at-large bid, but like Texas at 11-1, during the regular season and then dropping a game to LSU with their only losses on the resume for Texas, by that logic, being the SEC champ, and against Georgia, you're probably in the dance, all right? So then, you got Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee. Do they all get in? I'll preface with this. I think there is a world now where all three do make the college football playoff based on their resumes. However, I don't know how likely that is. So for Georgia now, 10-2, with hypothetically their only losses being at the time now, a top 5 Bama in Tuscaloosa, and then at Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss was number 16 last night, so it's not a top 10 loss, but again, it's respectable in some sense, also on the road. But the wins now, the wins in this hypothetical, you obviously already have the win over and at a top-ranked Texas. You have a win against Clemson, and when you got that win, that was a pretty quality ranked win. All right, so we'll see how it ages. I know Clemson's not top 15 anymore, but when you got that win, now Clemson was a somewhat more respectable opponent, at least a more respectable ranking. And then, again, in this hypothetical, we have Georgia beating Tennessee. And Tennessee, in this conversation, is right now at least a top 10 team. Have to believe that'd be the case when they would play them and beat them. So I think, again, committee keeps valuing eye test. We got Georgia at number 3 right now in the college football playoff rankings. I think that win over Texas means a lot. I just think the eye test plus the resume, I would have a difficult time seeing a world where Georgia at 10-2 gets left out of the college football playoff. So I think LSU, Texas, Georgia, you're all in. Let's go to Tennessee. Tennessee would have, by this logic, a loss to a top 10, ideally, if this is a situation where you get them after Ole Miss, and they lose to Ole Miss. A lot going on. Roll with me. Let's say Georgia's top 10 when you play them, and you lose to them. Your losses are unranked Arkansas on the road. You've made some amends since then, with them being a top 10 team right now in Tennessee, so that's great. And then your losses also to a top 10 Georgia. So those 2 losses, not the worst thing in the world. The wins, though, are also pretty quality. You have a win over a ranked Bama. I am of the opinion that wins should be frozen when you get them. Doesn't mean that they're just, okay, that was a top 25 win, you go ahead and freeze it forever, and that's, all you look at it as. No, it's a ranked win when you got it. However, we do have to keep a pulse on how it ages. You do have 2 other ranked wins in your back pocket if you're Tennessee. The win over NC State. NC State has not been the same team ever since. I understand that. However, when you got it, top 25 win. So we'll give you some credit for that. And then the win at Oklahoma. Again, when you got it, top 20 win. Hasn't aged great. I totally get that. But I do think that deserves a little bit of respect when we talk about Tennessee. I think I feel less confident about Tennessee making the playoff in this hypothetical than Georgia, but I do think that Tennessee would actually find their way in, especially because of what the committee is saying about them right now being a top 10 team in these initial rankings and because of the quality wins. Now, Ole Miss is a curious case because their losses would in this point be to a SEC champion LSU, and you would have a loss at Kentucky. Ooh, Kentucky one's not looking good. I get it. But the win that you have to your name is a number 3 ranked team in America coming to your place, and you beat them this weekend. That would start the party, all right? That would get this conversation some real legs. The worry for me with Ole Miss is you have that Georgia win that's awesome, but you scan the rest of the schedule and you're like, all right. Well, South Carolina, that win's aging great, but outside of that, I don't see a lot of other meat on the bone to make me say, hey, Ole Miss, you're in the dance. And maybe the Georgia win's enough for the committee. I don't know, but that's one that concerns me a little bit because I think the spot you're competing for is Ole Miss is probably up against a lot of other one-loss outfits. And again, Ole Miss would have 2 losses. So you're up against a one-loss Notre Dame, who would have, at this point in time, at the end of the season, if they end up being a one-loss team, 4 ranked wins more than likely. You're up against a one-loss Indiana. Their only loss is to a probably top 2 Ohio State. Same deal with Penn State, top 5 loss to Ohio State. You see where I'm going with this? I have a difficult time seeing the committee putting Ole Miss in over one of those teams. Not that it couldn't happen, but I have a more difficult time giving Ole Miss the nod here. So I think all could potentially have a case to be in the college football playoff if we get that SEC madness where a bunch of them have 2 losses. But as of right now, I'm going to say that you get 4 out of those 5 into the college football playoff, and some one losses from other conferences, or the independents rather, end up spoiling that for Ole Miss. As of right now. Now, one more one more hypothetical we got here from our guy Jeremiah. His hypothetical is Boise State wins out and they find themselves getting a first-round bye. So the way this would happen now, it's not unrealistic. Some of y'all are double taking at home and saying, wait, Boise State getting the first-round bye. JD, they're the G5 rep. They got to be the 12 seed, right? Not necessarily. Is that the most likely scenario? Yeah, probably. But by nature of how this 12-team field could be set, there is not an automatic bye for the Power 4 conference champs. The way that it reads is the highest-ranked 4 conference champions get the bye. So if that highest-ranked conference champion is the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Mountain West, those are the teams that get a bye the first round of the college football playoff. And I think the way this would happen, going to what I just spoke to a second ago, notice the conference I didn't mention there, the Big 12. And the Big 12 has potential to get very, very wacky down the stretch here. I think if the Big 12 champion is not undefeated BYU, this has a lot of life to it. Because Colorado now, they very much so have a chance to win the Big 12 and make the college football playoff. If they do that, they have 2 losses. Okay? So Colorado could very much so find themselves in the dance, but without a bye. And I don't think you're complaining about that. I think you just want to make the dance and you go make some noise when you get there. Same deal with the Iowa State. Iowa State, I mean, they could technically find themselves in the college football playoff as a champion. I mean, their one loss isn't as good as Boise State's one loss. Now, are their wins as good as Boise State's? Yeah, they are. Just quite frankly, they are better than Boise State's when you look at the caliber of play they have week in and week out. But this isn't crazy. This is not a crazy thought that you could have a Colorado or an Iowa State, heck, a BYU, find themselves as a Big 12 champ with a loss and on the outside looking in of having a bye in the college football playoff. So I don't know how much that's a thing that irks you. I think on one hand, you're like, yeah, we should have a bye. Look at the schedule we play based on what Boise State plays. I hear you. But Boise State's resume, man, they have, when they got it now, or not when they got it, how it's aged now, they have a ranked win over Washington State. Washington State ranked last night. Shouts to Wazoo. Their only loss is to the top team in America at their place by 3 points. That's the Oregon Ducks. Took a field goal to walk it off. So I'm just saying, everything we said about the 12 seed, if this ends up happening, gets turned on its head. Because I've said this all offseason. I said it, Andy and Ari on 3 said it. The 12 seed was more than likely going to be a G5 team. So by that logic now, the seed that was advantageous potentially to have would be the 5 seed. Because 5 plays 12 in the first round, and then more than likely, you would play the Big 12 rep the next round. Pretty nice path going forward here. Those should be 2 games that, honestly, you're favored in if you're the 5 seed. But what if that 12 seed is not a G5 rep? What if that 12 seed is a 10-2 SEC team? You got 10-2 Bama waiting for you in the first round. 10-2 LSU. Heck, 10-2 Texas or Georgia. Like, if it ends up being a 10-2 SEC team, or call it a Big Ten team, I don't care. Like, one of those teams is a much less advantageous and much less appealing draw for you in the first round of the college football playoff as a 5 seed than just to call a spade here, a G5 team. Will that happen? I don't know, but I'll tell you this, it's not unlikely. It is not unlikely based on the wackiness of the Big 12 and based on the potential of where Boise State could eventually finish at based on last night's rankings. So appreciate the hypotheticals, man. Y'all came with it. If you want to contribute to that conversation, this is an exercise. That, 1, is just a lot of fun, so we'll do it every single week. 2, we want to hear from y'all, and we will hear from y'all via my social channels. So if you want to contribute to that conversation now every Wednesday, I will put out a tweet either on Monday or on Tuesday and say, hey, give me your college football playoff hypotheticals. We'll usually pick 2 or 3, maybe 4 some weeks. Great way to contribute to the show. Great way to interact in the show. We appreciate you for that. So again, follow me on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, at JD Pickell, but that tweet will be put out early in the week to prep for the show. All right. So we've kind of got the college football playoff talk behind us for the most part in this show. I want us to talk about a team that's not going to make the playoff, and it's been an unideal year for the folks out there in Auburn, Alabama. We've done this a lot throughout the course of this show's existence, taking a pulse of the program. So we are putting our 2 fingers right there on probably the wrist, because I think that's probably the easiest way to get the pulse. You could also do the side of the neck from what I've heard. Apologize, I probably just covered my mic. Probably the side of the neck, also a good way to get the pulse. We're going to do that for Auburn right now, because going into this year now, the expectations were, hey, this is the year we take a massive step forward. I'm talking 8-4. We're 7-5, but we take a massive step forward. We lay the foundation for what we're going to be in the Hugh Freeze era, and then the good times are here again. Recruiting takes off, start winning ball games. The offense looks how it's supposed to, and y'all, it hasn't been that. It hasn't been that. Auburn right now is 3-6. The offense, while they've flashed at times, they've been up there nationally when it comes to yards per play. Defense has been really solid. They've struggled to take care of the football. They've struggled to, quite frankly, beat inferior opponents when it comes to the roster talent. And they're right now sitting at 3-6. And a large part of this, and I hate to say this, but like a large part of it is because of what Peyton Thorne hasn't brought to the table. Now, hear me clearly. I don't think it's a 100% thing where it's on Peyton Thorne. I think some of this is the offense gelling together. I think it's receivers making plays for him. I think it is the run game being consistent for him. I think there's a lot of things here to factor in when you talk about Auburn. And also playing in the SEC, it's a very, very different ball game than if you're playing in another conference. So I don't want to make this just sound too simplistic. But at the end of the day, man, you're the quarterback. You got to make us right. You got to be the equalizer for us. And so I think a lot of folks in Auburn, Alabama right now are like, man, if we had gone to the portal, we go get ourselves somebody. I don't want to mention a specific name because who knows who it would have been. But if we go to the portal, how different is our season? The answer is I don't know. I don't know. But again, this is not the year that you had envisioned. I totally get that. But I think it's interesting now when you zoom in on the fan base and their approach and their attitude to how things are going right now. Because the stat that's floating out right there, or that's I'll rephrase that. The stat that is floating around out there right now is Hugh Freeze and his record at this point in time compared to where Brian Harsin was at this point in time at Auburn. Right now, Hugh Freeze has a worse record than Brian Harsin. So people outside the Auburn circle are throwing stones and saying, man, he's not the right guy for the job. You hired Brian Harsin 2.0, just saying nonsense, saying just ridiculous things. Notice the pulse at Auburn, the fans at Auburn. I very, very seldom hear the thought that, man, Hugh Freeze isn't the right guy. Man, I don't know if he should get another year. Nobody's saying that. Why? Because Hugh Freeze is doing things that Brian Harsin was not doing at Auburn. Most notably, recruiting. Adding players. There is real direction, vision, and I'll say this too, on the recruiting trail now, there is momentum. Whenever you see, more often than not now, you see teams have a lack of success when they're supposed to have success during a season, what do you see? You see Hayes Fawcett decommitment graphics flying off the shelves. Haven't seen that with Auburn. Actually, the opposite. Auburn's going to work right now. Auburn has a top 6 class in America. Auburn got themselves Deuce Knight, one of the top quarterbacks in America. Auburn flipped him from Notre Dame. Auburn is currently working to flip a number of other players. All right, so it's interesting to note now there's actual momentum. There's an undercurrent at Auburn that is heading the right direction. Why is that? I think there's still belief in the vision and the plan of Hugh Freeze. It's also worth noting now, the head coach before Hugh Freeze, that we just mentioned Brian Harsin. I don't want to say it's all Brian Harsin's fault because it's never 100% one way or the other when you speak about things like this, especially college football programs. But it was not a ready-made situation. There is a reason why Hugh Freeze went heavily to the portal. There is a reason why a lot of young bucks are playing for Auburn this year. The talent level is not yet where it needs to be at. It's better. It's 100% better. But at the same time, it takes a while, I believe, for that roster talent to ultimately gel, solidify, and play at the level you need to play at. Even more importantly, when you don't have the quarterback you need to go win how you want to win. And again, I hate to throw shade at Peyton Thorne. It's not what we're trying to do here. I think Peyton Thorne is doing his best out there, but it's not working. It's not working. So what do you do now going forward? What's the vision at Auburn? We talked about vision, talked about momentum. What's the deal here? I said at the top of this segment, this year for Auburn was about foundation. Now, when you lay the foundation, what is it? It's just a base, right? It's just a way of doing things. It could be the roster. It could be culture. It is a base. Now, when you lay the foundation down, you may not see that. You're not putting a roof on the foundation. You're not putting a skyscraper up when you lay the foundation. The foundation is laid to eventually do those things. And so what I'm trying to say here is you can lay the foundation and do it the right way and still not see return on investment right away. So this was supposed to be the foundational year, right, where you saw results, where you go win 8 football games. Yeah, 100%. But it hasn't happened that way. That doesn't mean the work they're doing there internally at Auburn isn't still good work. It doesn't mean they can't still pop next year and do everything they wanted to do in that third year under Hugh Freeze anyway. So the path forward now is you're pushing this boulder up a hill. You are, from a roster perspective, from a way of doing things perspective, at least on the field, finding a way to not make these mistakes that hurt yourself and turn the football over. That's all what they're doing right now internally at Auburn. And we could see it come to fruition in a massive and very visible way this time next year. Not predicting it right now. The task ahead of them is you hit the portal again probably. You definitely hit the portal for a quarterback. You let Deuce Knight sit for a year, in my opinion, and then we'll see where this thing is this time next year. But the thing I would say here for Auburn, the pulse of the program is let's stay the course. Stay the course. Has it been how we wanted it to be this year? No. Are there things to gripe about? Absolutely. Does everybody have a fair share of blame from the roster to the head coach to the staff? Of course. Of course. That's the way that college football works. But I think we'd also be very much so ill-advised to think that for some reason the record that Brian Harsin had and the record Hugh Freeze has right now is the same situation and the same trajectory. It's not. Lay the foundation, do the right things, and then you could very much so, I believe, have that pop year you want to have in year 3. So the folks out there in Auburn, I get it. It's been an unideal year, but you just got to keep pressing on. Keep pressing on, and we'll see where we are here in a year's time. And honestly, in less than a year's time now. Talk about next college football season. That's a dark thought. I hate that. I hate that next college football season is already less than a year away. But it is what it is. All right. Hey, appreciate y'all being dialed in. This is a funny and special time of the year. It's funny because we're rounding the corner here, and it feels like we're coming down to the end of the season. And on paper we are, but remember now, we get to hit the reset on this season with the expanded college football playoff. Like, y'all, this season doesn't end until January 20th when they play the national title game in Atlanta. So dial in. If you haven't yet subscribed, would love to have y'all a part of this. Again, y'all make this show what it is. Cannot thank y'all enough. We know we are very lucky. We are very grateful to do this for a living, and we appreciate y'all equipping us and allowing us to do that. So for Nick Break on the ones and twos, for myself, JD Piquel, we love y'all. We appreciate y'all, man. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.